The rain had just started to fall, light enough to leave dots on the concrete, heavy enough to make people rush toward shelter. Amara Blake stood outside the tall glass doors of the Haven Tech Venture campus, holding nothing but a leather portfolio and a sense of calm that made others uncomfortable. The security guard at the front desk glanced at her briefly, then pretended not to notice her. He assumed she must be a delivery person, or maybe someone lost. He didn't bother to ask. Inside, warm lighting spilled across the marble floors. A group of sharply dressed people in navy suits passed through security without a word, without ID checks, without hesitation. The guard stood up quickly to greet them, smiling widely. "Good morning, sir. Go right ahead. Room 401, correct?" One woman in the group glanced at Amara with the sort of dismissiveness that comes from generations of inherited entitlement. Her eyes dropped to Amara's shoes, Italian leather, hand-stitched, but she didn't recognize quality when it wasn't announced with logos. Then she looked up again and scoffed as she entered the elevator with the others. Amara didn't move. She stood in silence, allowing herself to absorb every detail of this moment. The air smelled of filtered pine-scented HVAC. The receptionist, a young man with a gelled haircut and tight-lipped expression, finally addressed her. "Excuse me," he said, his tone already full of warning. "Can I help you with something?" Amara stepped forward. Her presence was not loud, but it carried weight. Her eyes met his, steady and unblinking. "Yes, I'm here for the quarterly review. Room 1 to see." The receptionist blinked, confused. "Quarterly review? Are you ... with the catering staff?" Amara allowed herself a half smile. "No." He narrowed his eyes. "Are you sure you're at the right place?" She tilted her head slightly. "Yes." The guard at the desk stepped in now, straightening his spine with a false sense of authority. "Ma'am, this building is restricted to Haven Tech partners and investors, unless you have credentials or a host listed." "I have an appointment," Amara interrupted gently. "You can look up the name Blake." The receptionist raised an eyebrow, already annoyed. He typed lazily into his terminal. "Blake, first name, Amara." His fingers paused over the keyboard. His eyes flicked back up, then down again. She could see the moment the name appeared on his screen. The color in his face shifted subtly, like a canvas being washed over with uncertainty. "Blake Amara. SCHEDULED for 8:45 a.m. He tried to recover. "Sorry, ma'am. Just wanted to make sure. People often try to get into meetings they're not cleared for. And what would make you think I wasn't cleared for this one?" He laughed, but it was awkward now. "No offense, just being careful." Amara didn't reply. She simply looked at the security guard and said, "Would you please call upstairs? Let them know Amara Blake has arrived." The guard nodded, now noticeably more careful right away. As he picked up the phone, the receptionist leaned toward her and said, "Just so you know, you'll probably want to wait outside. It's pretty tight up there. Not a lot of room. The executive suite's always full." Amara blinked slowly, then looked out through the glass wall. The rain had picked up. A line of luxury cars, mostly black Teslas and sleek BMWs, waited under the awning. "I'll wait inside," she said calmly. A pause. Then the guard said, "They're sending someone down." Minutes passed. More people entered the building. Everyone was given a smile. No one was asked who they were. Finally, the elevator doors opened and a tall man in a blue vest with an iPad stepped out. "Amara Blake?" he asked, scanning the room. Amara raised her hand. "Right here." He smiled awkwardly as he approached. "Oh, Miss Blake, good morning. I'm sorry about the delay. We weren't expecting you to arrive alone." Amara nodded. "I travel light." He gestured toward the elevator. "Right this way. Everyone's upstairs." As they rode the elevator up, the man, his name tag read Rich, tried to make conversation. "So, you're here for the review presentation?" "Yeah. Big day for some of the startups. The partners are already in place. They said a mystery investor was joining but didn't give us a name." "I see. They must really trust you, too. Bring you in blind," Rich said, chuckling. "It's rare anyone outside the core gets into this meeting." Amara just smiled slightly. "I think you'll find I belong there." The elevator doors opened into a glass-walled boardroom buzzing with energy. Men and women stood in clusters, talking in polished voices about valuations, burn rates, and Series B funding. At the end of the room, a long mahogany table gleamed beneath a chandelier. 12 name placards were placed evenly. The central seat remained unmarked. Amara stepped forward. Several heads turned and then the whispers began. "Who is that? Did someone invite HR? Is she one of the founder's assistants?" A woman in a beige pantsuit approached with a tight smile. "Excuse me, the event catering staff is setting up in room B. You might be." "She's with me," said a voice from the side. Everyone turned. It was Colin Reese, CEO of TrueSpan, a startup that had just landed $120 million in Series C funding. Colin walked up, extended his hand warmly. "Amara, glad you made it." Her smile was genuine now. "Thank you, Colin." She shook his hand, then stepped past him, and sat down in the central chair. Dead silence followed. One man chuckled nervously. "I'm sorry, Miss Blake," she replied. A senior partner frowned. "There must be some confusion. That seat is usually reserved for the lead equity stakeholder." Amara opened her portfolio, removed a single printed page. and slid it forward. As of last quarter, I owned 52% of Haventech's controlling equity, through multiple shell entities and silent partnerships. She stood. I funded most of the pipeline that's kept your startups alive for the last 18 months, and I've been invisible on purpose because I needed to see how my money was being protected. Her voice became clearer, stronger. Today, I saw enough. From the moment I walked through your front doors, I've been treated like an outsider in a company I own. From receptionists to managers to investors, the only thing you saw when you looked at me was what you expected me to be, not who I am. The room was frozen. She took a breath. So before this review begins, I have a short one of my own. Amara's eyes scanned every face in the room. One of you is about to lose your seat permanently. Silence doesn't always fall with peace. Sometimes it drops like a hammer. The boardroom had been filled with confident voices moments ago, talking numbers, forecasting projections, debating IPOs, but now, with Amara Blake seated confidently at the head of the table, a new tension had taken root. It wasn't just confusion. It was disbelief, panic, and for a few, guilt. One man near the far end of the table reached slowly for his water glass, trying to hide the tremble in his fingers. Another woman coughed to break the silence but said nothing. Somewhere outside, a phone buzzed. Ignored. Amara didn't move. She didn't need to. She had already said everything they weren't ready to hear. She owned them, quietly and completely. For years, Haventech had operated as a cutting-edge incubator for high-growth startups, nurturing dozens of Silicon Valley darlings from seed to stardom. What no one realized was that their biggest investor had been watching them from the shadows, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. She wanted to know who people were when they didn't know who she was, and now she knew as she calmly opened her portfolio and removed a thick report stamped "Confidential Internal Culture Audit." Amara could feel the discomfort ripple through the room like static. "This is a report I commissioned independently 6 months ago," she said quietly. "It includes anonymous feedback from over 70 employees across every level of this company." She paused. "Let me read you something." She flipped to a bookmarked page. "Sometimes I feel like the only thing that matters here is if you look the part. I've had my ideas dismissed in meetings only to hear them repeated on accepted when voiced by someone else who fit their tech bro mold." She turned the page. "We talk a lot about innovation, but behind closed doors, it's all the same boys club. If you're not white, male, or wearing a hoodie with venture capital stitched on the sleeve, you're invisible." Amara closed the folder. Her gaze didn't waver. "This isn't just about me. What happened downstairs this morning, being asked if I was with catering, being told to wait outside, isn't new, it's culture. And we built it." A man near the window, one of the older partners named Graham, finally spoke. "Miss Blake, with all due respect, I don't think it's fair to generalize from a single interaction. That receptionist was new. He didn't know." Amara cut in, not harshly, just enough. "You're right, Graham. He didn't know who I was, but he knew exactly who he thought I couldn't be." The words hung in the air like the smell of smoke after a fire. A few people shifted uncomfortably, but no one interrupted again. She leaned forward, calm and direct. "You've built an empire on disruption, haven't you? On tearing down barriers, on giving the underdog a shot, but only when that underdog already speaks your language and wears your uniform. You say innovation doesn't care where it comes from, then ignore it when it shows up wearing the wrong skin." A heavy silence followed, but it wasn't empty. It was full of self-reflection and, for some, shame. Amara pushed the report forward. "I'm not here for applause. I'm here to clean house. And we'll start with what you've been calling executive leadership." A low murmur passed through the room. One of the younger partners, a man named Shane, chuckled nervously. "Clean house? That's a bit dramatic, don't you think? We've made record profits under this team." Amara gave him a long look. "Profit doesn't excuse rot," she said, flatly. "It hides it. And I'm not here to run a plantation with Wi-Fi." Shane's face went pale. No one laughed at that moment. The door cracked open quietly and a young woman slipped in. She wore a gray blouse and loose curls framed her face. Her name badge read Lily Tran, and she was the most junior analyst in the entire company, an intern technically, placed through a diversity fellowship program no one upstairs had ever taken seriously. But Lily had been watching everything. She was the one who had seen Amara being turned away in the lobby. She had seen the receptionist snicker behind the desk. She had seen the security guard adjust his belt and puff his chest out, like protecting the marble lobby from a black woman was part of his patriotic duty, and she had seen Amara say nothing. Just watch. Just wait. Lily stood at the edge of the room now, unsure what to do. Amara turned slightly, saw her, and smiled. "Miss Tran," she said softly, "would you mind stepping in for a moment?" All eyes turned. Lily blinked, then walked slowly toward the table. Her hands trembled slightly, but her chin was high, gestured to an empty chair beside her. "This young woman," she said to the room, "witnessed what happened this morning, but she didn't walk away. She didn't pretend it wasn't her problem. She asked me if I needed help." Lily's face flushed pink. "I want everyone in this room to take a good look at her," Amara continued, "because this is the future of this company." Lily couldn't speak. but her eyes were wet now. She mouthed a quiet, "Thank you." Amara turned her gaze back to the boardroom. The old guard, the ones who'd built this structure, brick by brick, some knowingly, some blindly, in 2 days. Amara said, "I'll be releasing this audit publicly. It will go to the board, the media, and every employee on this campus. A beat, and it will be accompanied by a list of resignations I expect to receive voluntarily. Otherwise, terminations will begin by Friday." Graham cleared his throat. "With all due respect, Ms. Blake, this isn't how things are done." Amara smiled. "That's exactly the problem." She rose from her chair. "I'll be taking private meetings for the next 6 hours. Anyone who wishes to remain in this company had better bring not just performance metrics but a plan for change." Her voice lowered slightly. "And if any of you feel tempted to frame this as aggressive, or overreactive, or too emotional, remember this: I was silent this morning when they told me to wait outside, and I could have stayed silent now, but I didn't." She looked around the room one last time. "I'm not here to fit into your system. I'm here to rebuild it." And with that, she walked out, heels clicking on the floor like the closing of a courtroom behind her. No one said a word, but everything had changed. The executive wing of Haven Tech had never felt so quiet. Just one floor above the buzzing hive of developers and interns coding in glass pods and poring over whiteboards, the so-called war room had become eerily still, the kind of stillness that didn't signal peace but panic. 3 executives huddled in the corner near the espresso bar, whispering as though the oak-paneled walls had suddenly grown ears. Because, in a way, they had. Every door, every camera, every laptop in that building now belonged to Amara Blake, and everyone who had mocked her silence just an hour earlier was now scrambling to draft their own excuses in hushed tones. Inside the glass conference room, Graham, the gray-haired senior partner, removed his reading glasses and dropped into the leather chair as if the weight of the morning had added 20 years to his frame. Beside him, Shane, the cocky growth strategist, in his 30s, ran a hand through his gelled hair for the 5th time in 5 minutes. His mouth kept opening like he had something clever to say, but for once, nothing came out. Across from them, Karen Walsh, the VP of Culture and People Operations, who had always prided herself on her inclusive leadership workshops, sat frozen with her arms crossed so tightly they seemed fused to her sides. "She can't fire all of us," Shane finally muttered. Karen shot him a look. "She doesn't need to fire all of us. She just needs one head to roll to start a stampede." "But it's not like we meant to offend her," he argued. "We didn't even know who she was. And that's the problem," Graham said, his voice grave. "You didn't need to know who she was to treat her with basic respect." Shane scowled. "Since when do we treat investors like royalty, just walking in without PR handlers or badges?" "I thought we were supposed to what?" A voice interrupted from the doorway. They turned. Lily Tran stood just outside the frosted glass, holding a clipboard that looked too big for her hands. Her curls were slightly frizzed from the humidity, and she wore no makeup, that same gray blouse from earlier. But her presence made them sit up. "The CEO would like to speak with each of you, privately." Shane's smirk returned, if only for a moment. "She sent the intern to do her dirty work." Lily didn't flinch. "No, sir. I volunteered. I figured you'd be more comfortable hearing it from someone who doesn't intimidate you." Graham closed his eyes briefly. Even he knew when a line had landed. "Who's first?" "She wants to see Ms. Walsh." Karen stood with stiff shoulders, smoothing her blazer as if that could press out what had already wrinkled her reputation. She followed Lily down the hall toward a room marked Executive 2, heart-pounding. Inside, Amara waited not at the head of a boardroom table, but on a simple gray couch, sipping from a ceramic mug. The room smelled of jasmine tea and something subtler, like calm before a storm. Karen cleared her throat, double quotes, "Ms. Blake, thank you for inviting me to speak." Amara gestured to the seat opposite her. "Karen, please, sit." There was something terrifying about her kindness, not false, but composed in a way that let Karen know she was not in control here. "I want to start by saying," Karen began, "that I am truly sorry for what happened this morning. It does not reflect the values I've worked so hard to." "Do you remember a name?" Amara interrupted softly. Karen blinked. A name of even one employee from the fellowship program we created 3 years ago. Can you name one of the hires we were supposed to mentor into leadership?" Karen shifted uncomfortably. "Well, I don't have the names memorized. Lily Tran is one of them." Karen froze. "She was supposed to be paired with you," Amara continued, voice flat. "Assigned as your shadow for 12 weeks. Did you ever even meet with her once?" Karen opened her mouth, closed it. "No," Amara answered for her. "You passed her down to your assistant and told her there was no capacity at the moment, Ms. Blake. This isn't personal, Karen, it's cultural, and you're the one who was supposed to fix it. Instead, you became a mirror of everything we were trying to dismantle." Karen swallowed. "So, are you letting me go?" Amara's eyes were unreadable. "I'm offering you 2 choices," she said quietly. "Resign today, with a generous severance package, or stay for 30 days as a transition lead, report to Lily Tran, and help her rebuild the department you failed to nurture." Karen's mouth parted in disbelief. You want me to report to the intern? No, Amara corrected gently. I want you to report to the future. For the first time in her career, Karen had nothing to say. Meanwhile, word had started to spread. In the cafeteria downstairs, staff were whispering. Some were wide-eyed with awe. Others laughed nervously, waiting for some kind of press release to make sense of the rumors. I heard she owns the whole company. She doesn't just own it, someone else said. She built half the AI stack that got us into NASDAQ pre-listing. We just never saw her. I heard she started as a coder. No, dude, she was a homeless kid who got a full ride to MIT. No way. Upstairs, another door opened. This time, Shane entered Amara's office like he was walking into a courtroom where he hoped his charm could get him acquitted. He smiled too broadly, sat too quickly. First off, I just want to say I admire everything you've built truly. I didn't mean any disrespect earlier, I just didn't recognize you. Amara looked at him with a calm that made his confidence waver. You didn't recognize me, she repeated. That's understandable. But what I'd like you to explain is this: why did that mean you assumed I didn't belong? Shane shifted. I mean, I didn't assume, I just thought maybe you were lost. I didn't want to embarrass anyone. But you did, she said plainly. Multiple people over months. Amara opened her portfolio again and slid a file across the table. That's an internal complaint record. It includes no fewer than 8 anonymous reports of you interrupting women of color in meetings, dismissing ideas until they were echoed by others, and mocking our diversity fellowship as charity hires. Shane's face flushed. That's ridiculous. People take things out of context. You called one candidate a token scholarship baby on Slack. Shane's voice rose, defensive. It was a joke. Come on, you know how it is in tech. People joke around. I didn't mean it like that. I know exactly how it is in tech, Amara said, her tone turning to ice. Which is why I intend to change it. She stood. I'm terminating your position, effective immediately. Your credentials will be revoked by the end of the day. He stood too, incredulous. You can't be serious. Deadly. This is cancel culture gone mad, he blurted. This is consequences, she replied. Security was waiting outside the door before he could even argue again. By late afternoon, the executive floor felt like a ghost town. Amara sat back down, on the gray couch, sipping tea, her mind distant. Outside her office window, the city pulsed like a circuit board, glittering with promises and old power. She had made her first moves. The first cracks had formed, but she knew the real collapse was only beginning. Tomorrow, the press would know. The investors, the world, but tonight she would walk back through that same lobby where they had told her she didn't belong, and she'd hold the door open for someone who looked just like her. Amara Blake wasn't born into power. She earned it in silence. She bought it in pieces, and she wore it -invisible to the world. She was just another face in a crowd, a polite woman who didn't demand attention. But underneath every smile, every carefully chosen silence, and every calm nod, lived a fire that had burned since she was 10 years old. That was the age. Amara sat beside her mother in a cold welfare office in Cleveland. The waiting room chairs were broken. The carpet was stained, and the security guard had looked at them like they were a nuisance instead of people. Why did they talk to us like that? Amara had whispered to her mother, eyes wide, throat tight. Her mother, Laverne Blake Wences, well teacher, now a tired woman with 3 part-time jobs, just squeezed her daughter's hand and replied, because they think we can't fight. Back that night, Amara had made a promise to herself. She'd never raise her voice to be heard. She'd never beg for a seat at the table. She'd build her own. The journey was brutal. Amara earned a full ride to an elite prep school when she was 13, a school where she was the only black girl in most of her classes, where classmates wore Rolexes and dropped off SAT scores like business cards, where she was once mistaken for a janitor's daughter during orientation. But Amara had a secret weapon. She remembered everything. The way people looked past her, the things they muttered when they thought she couldn't hear, the uncomfortable pause when she raised her hand and gave an answer they didn't expect her to know. By 17, she was building machine learning models on borrowed school laptops and tutoring classmates whose parents made 7 figures. By 18, she had been accepted to MIT, and by 22 she walked across the graduation stage with honors, scholarships, and 3 patents pending. But even then, she knew knowledge alone wouldn't protect her from the world's assumptions. Her first startup failed, not because the tech was weak, it was groundbreaking. In fact, an AI tool that improved cloud security through predictive breach patterns. But Amara couldn't get anyone to fund it. Investors sat across from her and asked if there was a technical co-founder on her team. She was the technical co-founder. One even told her, "You're impressive, but I just don't know if you have the presence for leadership." Translation: you're too black, too soft-spoken to not dash us. So she stopped asking for permission. She built her second venture in stealth. She found quiet partners, forged trust with underappreciated engineers, and licensed her tech through back channels white-labeled, through firms that looked like the industry's golden boys. The money came in fast, not in headlines, but in clean wires. And when those firms began selling, merging and going public. Amara did something none of them saw coming. She used the equity she'd earned behind the scenes to start buying them back, silently, legally, piece by piece. When Haven Tech launched its fourth incubator cohort, Amara was already a shadow stakeholder. She sat through pitch nights disguised as a guest. She read every employee survey, especially the ones labeled anonymous. She watched how they treated junior analysts. She saw how many women of color presented big ideas only to be spoken over. She noted how often culture fit was used to reject brilliance that didn't dress the same or network in the right rooms, and she smiled, because all of it confirmed what she'd always known: true power is what you use when no one sees you coming. At 35, Amara made her largest acquisition yet, through 3 shell corporations. She bought controlling interest in Haven Tech's parent group. On paper, it looked like the usual maneuvering venture chess. No one questioned it. No one even noticed. She never showed her face in investor calls. She never requested a title. She never issued a memo. Instead, she watched and waited until the day came when they told her to wait outside. Now, as the sun dipped low outside the Haven Tech glass towers, Amara stood in her private corner office, the one she never used, and looked down at the city. Her tea had gone cold. Behind her, her assistant Sarah entered quietly. "They're all gone," she said. "Karen opted for the transition period. Shane was escorted out. And Graham has formally submitted his resignation." Amara nodded. "Lily's waiting in conference A. She's nervous. Let her wait 2 minutes," Amara said softly. "Then bring her in." Sarah paused. "Your pardon?" "Sure I am." 2 minutes later, Lily entered, holding a notebook tight against her chest like armor. She looked confused, unsure. "Miss Blake, sit," Amara said gently. Lily sat. Amara reached into her folder and slid a single envelope across the table. Lily opened it. Red froze. "I don't understand," she whispered. "Is this?" "It's a formal offer," Amara said. "You'll head the New Voices initiative. A new internal program that rebuilds our mentorship pipeline and redesigns our culture. Full autonomy, full funding. And I answer to you on this one." Lily's mouth opened, but nothing came out. "I saw you stand up when no one else did," Amara continued. "I saw you hesitate but then step forward anyway. That's leadership." Lily's voice cracked. "But I'm just an intern." "You were," Amara said. "Now, you're the reason we'll change." Tears welled in Lily's eyes as she stared at the offer letter, not just at the salary but the belief behind it. "Thank you," she whispered. "No," Amara replied, smiling gently. "Thank you for seeing me before the world did." They sat together for a moment in the golden hush of early evening. Women, one legacy beginning, one just igniting. Behind every smile there had been pain, but now, behind every step forward, there would be purpose. It began not with a press conference but with an upload. At 9:03 a.m. Eastern Time, a single PDF file appeared on the Haven Tech official site under a newly created tab titled simply, "Change Starts Here." It was a 74-page internal audit report authored and signed by Amara Blake, herself CEO, majority shareholder, and, until recently, the company's best-kept secret. The report didn't pull punches. It didn't hide behind corporate jargon or polished PR language. It named departments, it identified behaviors, and it exposed patterns of discrimination that had quietly infected the company's DNA for years. Alongside the report was a 2-minute video. Just Amara, sitting at a table, no filters, no dramatic music. Her words were clear, composed, and devastating. "Last week, I was told to wait outside a building I own because I didn't look like someone who belongs in a boardroom. I was mistaken for support staff twice, and while I could have revealed who I was in that moment, I chose not to because I wanted to see how deep the problem really was. And I saw enough. This report is not about shame, it's about truth. It's about the culture we allowed to fester when we weren't paying attention. But now, we're paying attention, and things will change. Starting today." By 9:10 a.m., the video had been viewed 1.4 million times. By 9:30 a.m., #AmaraBlake and #WaitOutside were trending across social media platforms, with clips circulating like wildfire. Influencers, business leaders, activists, even celebrities began reposting the video, some in disbelief, others in solidarity. But the real tremors began in the boardrooms. At a midtown skyscraper in Manhattan, the Haven Tech Holding Board of Directors convened an emergency meeting, half of them still in disbelief at the overnight media frenzy. Robert Sterling, chairman of the board and an old-school corporate veteran who had always dismissed diversity talk as branding fluff, was pacing. "She went public," he said, incredulous with everything. Another board member, Serena Patel, scrolled through the report on her tablet. "She did more than go public. She gave the playbook to dismantle our internal roadmap, the receipts. This is going to tank investor confidence." Another man muttered. "We'll be on the cover of Forbes." "For all the wrong reasons. Or the right ones," Serena said. Robert stopped pacing. "You don't seriously support this circus." "I do," she said firmly. "For once, someone in power actually did something instead of giving a TED talk, and the public isn't angry. Look at the comments. People are grateful she's doing what we were too scared to." There was silence in the room. Then, slowly, Robert sat down. She didn't ask us for approval. She didn't need it, Serena replied. She's the majority shareholder now. You gave that up when you sold your options last year. Robert clenched his jaw. Then this is her company now. Serena smiled faintly. It always was. Back at Haventech's headquarters, a line had formed outside the building before noon, but it wasn't customers. It was media. CNN, Bloomberg, Business Insider, and NPR had all dispatched reporters to get a glimpse of the woman who had turned corporate accountability into a national conversation. Inside, Amara was unmoved. She hadn't come to be a celebrity. She had come to clean house. At 11:15 a.m., she entered the executive conference room with her new task force, the Cultural Rebuild Committee, led by none other than Lily Tran, now officially promoted and armed with a team of hand-picked changemakers from every level of the company. Amara looked around the room at the stunned faces of managers and directors, people who'd once scoffed at bias training and referred to day efforts as optics. This is your new reporting structure, she said, pointing to Lily's team. They will have authority to review, audit, and restructure every department, starting with hiring practices and pay equity. One manager raised his hand. Ms. Blake, surely you don't mean to suggest we're the problem. We've been compliant with every corporate regulation. This isn't about legal compliance. Amara cut in, voice like steel wrapped in silk. This is about moral alignment. The man sat down. Amara continued. There will be mandatory sessions, not lectures, conversations. You'll listen, you'll reflect, you'll learn how to lead differently. And if you don't want to, the door's behind you. Another woman spoke up. Are we being punished? Amara shook her head. You're being given a chance. And that's more than most people ever got in this company. Then she turned to Lily. Would you like to say anything? Lily stood. Her voice trembled at first, but steadied quickly. I'm not here to humiliate anyone, she said. I'm here to make sure no one else is ever humiliated the way I've seen others be. We're not dismantling the company. We're rebuilding it, with a stronger foundation. The room was silent, not with fear but with realization something real was happening. That afternoon, Amara held a closed-door meeting with investors, many of whom had emailed furiously in the morning, demanding answers about the public fallout. She walked in alone, no lawyer, no assistant, just herself. I understand you're worried, she began. You should be. Change is always uncomfortable. One investor leaned forward. Amara, we're not social justice advocates. We're here for returns. That's what this firm promised. And you'll get them, she replied calmly. But not through old systems that exploit, exclude, or silence. You want longevity, innovation, loyalty. Then you invest in people, not just products. Another investor pushed back. This woke branding thing won't last. In a year, no one will care. Amara smiled. You will, she said, because companies that don't adapt don't survive. Just ask Blockbuster. That silenced the room. She ended the meeting with a line that would later be quoted in business magazines worldwide. If you're not building a future that includes everyone, you're building a past that repeats itself. By evening, Haventech stock began to stabilize. Then, to everyone's surprise, it began to rise. Not dramatically, not explosively, but steadily, because as the public devoured the story of the black woman who had been told to wait outside, and instead walked in to change the rules, people began investing in more than just tech. They invested in trust. At home that night, Amara sat alone in her study. The lights were low. The day had been long, loud, relentless, but for the first time in a long time she felt peace. Her phone buzzed. A message from her father. Saw the video. Your mother would be proud. She smiled, closed her eyes, and let that be enough, because the reckoning had begun, and there was no turning back. It wasn't held in the boardroom. It wasn't scheduled through executive assistants. There were no embossed invitations, no valet parking, and no catered sushi trays. This meeting, the one they'd talk about for years, was called by a single, all-company email, sent at 6:42 a.m. from Amara Blake's personal inbox. The subject line read, Let's talk. No titles, no ranks, just us. The location, the ground floor atrium of Haventech's global headquarters. The time, 10 a.m. sharp. The tone, revolutionary. By 9:50, employees began trickling in, engineers still wearing hoodies from overnight code sprints, janitorial staff fresh off the night shift, security guards adjusting their ties, interns clutching notepads with trembling hands. They filled the space slowly at first, hesitantly. Then the stream grew. Accountants, HR associates, receptionists, product designers, legal clerks, and marketing leads. Many had never been in the same room before. A few didn't even know each other's names. But today everyone showed up. There, in the center of it all, stood Amara. No platform, no podium, just her, wearing a black sweater, simple slacks, and a gold ring that once belonged to her mother. She didn't hold a microphone. She didn't need one. The room hushed on its own. And then she began. I know most of you still don't know who I am, Amara said, her voice soft but unwavering. You've seen the reports, read the news, maybe even watched the video. But let me introduce myself the way I wish I had been introduced the first time I walked into this building. She stepped forward. My name is Amara Blake. I am the majority shareholder of Haventech. I am its current CEO. But before I was either of those things, I was a little girl in Cleveland who watched her mother cry after being disrespected by a manager at a temp agency. I was a scholarship kid in a school full of people who didn't think I belonged. I was a founder turned down for funding not because my idea lacked value but because my face didn't look familiar to them. She paused, and a few days ago I was a woman standing in the lobby of this very building being told to wait outside. A collective breath moved through the crowd, quiet but real. I didn't speak up then, she said, because I wanted to see how deep the assumptions ran. And I did. She looked around the room, making eye contact with people, real people who had never once been invited into the kind of spaces she was now opening. But this meeting, she said, isn't about what went wrong. It's about what comes next. A projector screen behind her flickered on. No graphs, no pie charts. Just one sentence in bold white font on a black background. What does it mean to belong? She turned to the crowd. I'm not asking rhetorically. I want to hear from you, all of you. Because starting today we build Haven Tech again from the inside out, and we do it together. For the first few seconds, no one moved. Then, a man in his mid-50s stepped forward. His name badge read Raul, and he wore the Navy uniform of the night janitorial crew. His voice was thick with a Salvadoran accent. I've worked here 8 years, he said. I clean the floors before anyone comes in. I've seen everyone's shoes, but never anyone's eyes. Until today. He looked down, then back up. I belong when someone learns my name. The room went quiet. Then applause broke out, not polite, but emotional roar, and that opened the floodgates. A woman in a floral blouse raised her hand. I'm Erin, front desk admin. I belong when someone doesn't assume I'm someone else's assistant just because I'm sitting at reception. A black engineer named Desmond added. I belong when I can pitch an idea without being told I'm too passionate while my white coworker is called visionary. A nervous intern whispered. I belong when my silence isn't mistaken for ignorance. Then, from the back, a woman's voice cut through the tension. My name is Stephanie. Heads turned. She was tall, blonde, and familiar. Too familiar. Stephanie Williams, the flight attendant. The one who started it all. A ripple went through the crowd, some surprised she was even there. I was terminated last week, Stephanie said. Rightfully so. But Amara invited me to attend this meeting not as an employee, not as a victim or villain, but as a witness. People shifted. Unsure, I thought I knew what power looked like. She continued, and I was wrong. I've been wrong more times than I can count. I assumed, I dismissed, I judged, and I hurt people. She looked directly at Amara. Thank you for letting me sit in the back of the room. I don't deserve it, but I need it. Amara nodded once. The moment settled into the bones of the room. This wasn't a show, it was a reckoning. And also, redemption. The meeting went on for hours. No one left, not even to check email. People spoke who had never spoken before. They shared stories, frustrations, dreams. They cried. They clapped. They disagreed. They listened. And Amara stood through all of it. Not as an overlord but as a mirror when it was finally over. When the atrium emptied and the echoes of honesty still lingered in the air, Amara turned to Lily. They trusted each other today, she said quietly. Lily nodded. Because you trusted them first. No, Amara said, smiling faintly. Because they trusted themselves enough to finally speak. That night, an email went out to all staff. Subject: what belonging looks like. Body. Today we didn't have a company meeting, we had a human meeting. We'll be hosting these open floor sessions once a month. Every department, every level. Anonymous feedback will be gathered in between. Changes will be tracked publicly. There are no closed doors anymore. Just conversations. Belonging isn't a statement, it's a practice. Let's keep practicing. Signed, Amara. It would go down in company history as the day the walls came down. Not because policies changed, but because people did. And Amara, she didn't stand above the transformation. She stood in it with them because, in the end, she hadn't just reclaimed her space, she had made room for everyone else too. It didn't happen overnight, not because Amara Blake lacked the power to make sweeping declarations, not because she feared backlash, and certainly not because she had anything left to prove. It didn't happen overnight because real reform, the kind that burns through dead systems and leaves space for something alive to grow, takes time, intention, and truth. And Amara was willing to scorch the earth if it meant building something better on it. The week after the town hall, every department received the same 5-page document. Subject line: clean start, audit, rethink, rebuild. It wasn't a memo, it was a manifesto, a blueprint for what Haven Tech would become if it was brave enough. In it were mandates. Every leadership team must complete a 360-degree accountability assessment including anonymous feedback from subordinates, peers, and even interns. All pay bands and salary histories would be disclosed internally, starting with executive compensation. Diversity was no longer a metric. It was a mandatory standard with quarterly progress publicly posted. No more referral-only hiring. No more resumes tossed because of cultural mismatch. Every hiring manager would receive bias training, monitored by a third-party firm. Promotions would require justification not only based on performance but on mentorship records. Had you lifted others as you climbed? And most radical of all, 5% ownership equity was reallocated to a shared employee trust, prioritizing entry-level workers, assistants, custodial staff, and support teams. The board gasped when they saw it. Investors panicked. One even called her directly. "You're giving away equity?" he asked, his voice shrill. "You'll dilute the value." "No," Amara replied. "I'm distributing it. The value rises when the people who build it have a stake in it. But that's not how Silicon Valley operates." Then it's time Silicon Valley learned something new. She hung up, and kept moving. Inside Haventech, the reaction was seismic. For some it was relief, validation, the breath they hadn't realized they were holding for years. For others, it was discomfort, threat, the shaking of ladders they'd been climbing without ever looking down. But one thing was clear. No one could ignore it. The fires of reform had been lightened. Amara had thrown the match herself. Lily Tran, now director of People Innovation, oversaw the transformation. Her team worked around the clock, meeting with former interns, junior staff, and people who had never been asked what they thought, only told what they should do. They listened. They compiled stories. They exposed weak links. In one meeting, a quiet payroll assistant named Sonia spoke for the first time. "I've worked here 6 years," she said, "and I've never had a performance review. I'm just here, invisible." That week, Sonia was promoted and placed on the company's new Ethics and Culture Council. In another case, 2 security guards were found to be enforcing building rules differently depending on a person's appearance. They were suspended and asked to participate in the first round of equity and justice workshops, not as punishment, but as partners. This wasn't about firing everyone. This was about teaching, about accountability. Yes, but also redemption, because Amara believed something rare in the world of power, that people could change if they were given the chance to look inward and a reason to rise. The press called it the Haventech Reformation. Business journals labeled Amara the architect of accountability. Social media called her the CEO of the people. But Amara ignored the noise. She didn't want applause. She wanted replication. So she did something few CEOs ever dared to do. She opened the entire reform plan. Every policy, every training module, every pay scale, restructure and employee equity trust document uploaded publicly for other companies to study, adapt, and even copy. "We didn't invent fairness," Amara said in a LinkedIn post. "We just decided to stop fearing it." Her post was shared over 1 million times in 3 days. Dozens of tech companies reached out, asking to implement parts of the Haventech model. A few hedge funds tried to spin it as PR maneuvering. They failed, because Amara didn't just look different, she led differently. And the world saw that. Meanwhile, inside Haventech, something else was changing. People started looking each other in the eye again. In elevators, in hallways, in meetings, the walls were still glass, the chairs still sleek, but something had shifted. The air itself felt less filtered, less cold. Janitors were thanked. Receptionists were named. Assistants began receiving invites to strategic meetings, not as notes, but as contributors. And perhaps most powerfully of all, Stephanie Williams, the flight attendant who once humiliated Amara, turned, not as an employee, but as a voice. She had spent her months of unemployment volunteering with inclusion organizations, attending workshops, confronting her own bias, and reaching out to those she had once dismissed. When she wrote a public letter of apology, many expected Amara to ignore it. Instead, she invited Stephanie to co-lead Haventech's new anti-bias storytelling project, a training series where real stories of discrimination were shared alongside real stories of change. "I used to think leadership was about knowing who belonged," Stephanie said in her first session. "Now I know it's about making everyone feel they do." Some cried, some apologized, some simply sat in silence, letting the truth settle in. Amara stood in the back of the room, dodging, not because she needed to monitor it, but because she believed in letting the fire of truth burn through shame until all that remained was possibility. Weeks passed, then months, and Haventech, once a quiet name in a loud industry, became something else entirely, a symbol not of perfection, but of possibility. And Amara Blake, she kept walking forward, head high, shoulders strong, hand always holding the door open for whoever came next. The email was simple. No colors, no formatting, just a plain white box with a message typed in Amara's trademark clear tone. Subject: Write the future. We are building something bigger than ourselves. Before we move forward, I want us to pause to listen. If you had one letter to write to the future of Haventech, what would it say? Tell the truth. No names needed, no filters. Just your heart. Submit it here. We'll read them, and together we'll respond. The link lead to a form with one empty field. No character limit, no questions. By the end of the first day, over 1,400 letters had poured in, and by the third, nearly every employee from the security team to senior engineers to the third shift cafeteria staff had written something. Submissions came anonymously, just as Amara promised, but anonymity didn't hide truth, it revealed it. Amara sat alone in her office, scrolling through the letters as the sun dipped behind the skyline. She didn't skim, she read each one, slowly, carefully, like they were sacred, because they were. One by one, the truths poured in. "I was told I smiled too much to be taken seriously." Then I stopped smiling and they called me cold. I watched a woman pitch a product I helped build. She never said my name once, but I still clapped for her. I didn't report the joke because I didn't want to seem dramatic. Then I watched 3 more women leave before me. I've worked here 10 years and this is the first time anyone asked me what I believe, not just what I do. My hands are stained with silence. I thought I had to act like them to succeed. But now I wonder what would have happened if I'd just acted like myself. There were letters from the exhausted, the hopeful, the invisible, the ashamed, and the brave. But one letter, one small letter tucked between 2 longer confessions froze Amara in place. It read, "Dear future. I was the receptionist, the one who told you to wait outside. I didn't recognize you. I didn't question why. I just did what I thought was expected of me. And I've been thinking about that moment every single day since. Not just because you were the CEO, but because I didn't stop to ask myself a simple question. What if I was wrong? What if every time I assumed I denied someone a piece of their dignity? I've read the report. I've watched the changes. And I want to be part of it. Not because I deserve to be, but because I finally understand. The kind of company I want to work for doesn't punish mistakes. It turns them into mirrors. Thank you for holding one up. Someone learning. Amara's eyes welled not with sadness, but with something rarer. Grace. The next morning, she called a meeting but not in a conference room. Instead, she converted Haventech's largest open floor space once used for product launches into a reading circle. Dozens of employees gathered. Some wore badges. Some wore name tags. Some didn't speak at all, but all of them came to listen, and Amara began to read. Out loud, one by one, she read the letters without names, but with reverence. Some sparked tears, others laughter, a few silence so heavy it felt like the building itself was holding its breath. Then she closed the last page and said, "These are not complaints, these are not accusations, these are seeds, and if we're brave enough, we'll plant every one of them, and watch something better grow." To honor the letters, Amara created the Wall of Witness, a digital display, installed in the building's main entrance, that rotated selected anonymous letters every week. Each submission displayed in black font on a white screen, no embellishment, just words. Above it, engraved in steel, "Truth is not the enemy of success, it's the beginning of it." Visitors paused. Employees wept. Some stood for long minutes, rereading their own confessions, knowing no one could see it was them, except Amara. She saw all of them, and she never judged. In the weeks that followed, another ripple unfolded. Employees began writing to themselves. Some pinned letters to their desks. Others taped them to mirrors. The act of writing had become ritual, healing, sacred. And every Friday, Amara printed one letter and left it folded on someone's desk. Not always the loudest, usually the quietest. Each envelope simply said, "I read your truth, and I believe in your future." Then one morning, a new letter arrived, this time with a name. It came from an old employee, someone who had walked out in the chaos of change. It was from Graham Keller, the former senior partner. Amara, I watched the company transform from the outside. At first, I called it overreaction, then disruption. But now I see it for what it is, restoration. I was part of the old system. I see that now, and I want to offer more than an apology. I want to offer my experience not to guide but to serve. If there's ever a role where my years can support someone else's rise, I'd be honored. Humbly, Graham. Amara read the letter twice, then placed it gently into a file titled Second Chances, because reform wasn't just about removal, it was about return when people were ready. That Friday, the Wall of Witness displayed just 5 words, no author, just impact. This time I spoke up, and all across Haventech heads nodded. Some cried, some wrote again. Some whispered to themselves, "Me too." Because a future worth building is built with letters, first. With voices, with forgiveness, and above all, with the courage to look forward while still holding what was. The mahogany table had been replaced. For over a decade, that table had been a symbol of hierarchy, polished, oversized, and cold. It was the kind of table that invited silence, not collaboration. The kind where names were remembered only if they carried titles. And it was gone now, donated to a museum exhibit on outdated corporate models. In its place stood something far humbler, a large, circular oak table made by hand by a team of artisans, some of whom were the very same maintenance workers whose voices had once gone unheard at Haventech. Amara had commissioned it herself. No corners, no hierarchy, no head of the table. Because power didn't need a throne to be effective. It just needed to be shared. This was not just an aesthetic shift, it was a philosophy. And today, that philosophy would be put to the test. It was the first official meeting of the new executive leadership team. 9 individuals carefully chosen, not only for their experience or credentials, but for their character, their history of mentorship, their humility, and above all, their capacity to listen. The team was intentionally diverse culturally, racially, generationally, even in professional backgrounds. One had come from academia, another from the nonprofit world. One had started as a cashier, one had been formerly incarcerated, Another, a stay-at-home parent returning to the workforce. The only thing they all had in common: they hadn't been handed power, they'd earned it quietly, persistently, and often while being overlooked. Now they sat at the same table and Amara stood before them. "I didn't rebuild this team to be performative," she began. "I rebuilt it to be prophetic." She let the words settle. "In this room, we do not pretend, we do not posture, and we do not perform inclusion for PR value. We lead it from inside." She walked around the table slowly. "We will make mistakes, we will disagree, but we will not go backward, not in tone, not in vision, not in purpose." She tapped the table once. "This circle will be mirrored across the company. Each department will create its own inclusive leadership board, designed to elevate voices at all levels. Ideas must rise from the floor, not just trickle down from the top." A young executive, Maya Reyes, formerly a senior developer, spoke. Gently, "Some might say we've changed too fast." Amara smiled. "Then let's be faster at explaining why." After the meeting, Amara stayed behind. She didn't leave for another appointment. She didn't call her assistant. She simply walked over to the giant wall of windows that overlooked the city. The skyline hadn't changed, but everything else had. She thought of the first time she stood there on her first tour of Haventech years ago. Just a silent observer. No one had spoken to her except to point to the women's restroom. No one had asked what she did. She hadn't been invisible. She had been dismissed. Now she could see employees on the streets below, smiling, chatting, leaving for lunch, in groups that looked like the city, not just the old idea of corporate America. The change wasn't just policy. It was in posture, in how people walked now, how they stood, how they looked one another in the eye. Her reverie was broken by a knock on the glass door. It was Lily. "Sorry to interrupt," she said gently. Amara turned, smiling. "You're not interrupting. What's up?" "I think you should see this," Lily said, holding out a printed email. It was from the National Business Ethics Consortium. Amara scanned the letter quickly. They were inviting her to give the opening keynote at the Global Leadership Summit in Switzerland. But not just to speak, they were awarding her the Ethics and Innovation Medal, the first ever given to a woman of color in the organization's 82-year history. Amara stared at the paper for a long moment, then handed it back. "Tell them I'm honored," she said, "and that I'd like to decline the speech." Lily blinked. "You're declining, but why?" Amara smiled. "Because I want Lily Tran to give it." Lily froze. "Me, you've led half this reform. You've carried voices others would have overlooked. You believed in the process before it was popular. They want a speech on ethical transformation. Then let them hear it from the person who transformed us." Lily opened her mouth, closed it. Amara walked over, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You're the future, Lily, and the future deserves the microphone." Across the campus, the changes kept unfolding. In one department, veteran employees started a mentoring circle for new hires from underserved backgrounds. In another, 2 junior analysts launched a culture newsletter called Voices at the Table. At the building's entrance, the wall of witness had evolved, now featuring not just letters, but responses. Anonymous submissions now received thoughtful, public replies from leadership, fostering dialogue, not just confession. One letter had recently said, "I still don't know if I belong, but I want to," and underneath it, in soft blue font, the reply read, "Belonging is not a door you have to knock on. It's a light we keep on until you're ready to come in." In a small quiet room on the 9th floor, once a storage closet, created something else. A legacy project. There was no announcement, no nameplate. Just a velvet box on a shelf inside it. The original rejection letter she received when she pitched her first startup. The one that said, "Your idea is promising, but we're looking for a founder with stronger leadership presence," and beside it, a handwritten note she added just last week. "I used to think power meant being seen. Now I know power is what? It happens when you help others be seen too." She didn't tell anyone it was there. Not yet, because some rooms are meant to be discovered when the time is right, just like she had been. The car pulled up to a quiet, cracked sidewalk in East Cleveland. The houses here didn't scrape the sky. They leaned slightly, tired from years of holding too much weight. Faded porches, basketball hoops with nets that had long since unraveled, a corner store with its sign half lit. It was the kind of street you don't find in business magazines, and yet, it held more stories than most boardrooms ever would. Amara Blake stepped out of the back seat alone. No security, no PR handler, no camera crew. Just her and a folded piece of paper tucked in the pocket of her coat. A letter written a long time ago, never sent, never shown. The one she wrote to herself when she was 17, the day she got her acceptance letter to MIT. And the eviction notice on the same morning she walked past the rusted chain-link fence and stood before the apartment she once called home. Apartment to be, 2nd floor, far left. She could still remember the way the hallway always smelled like burnt toast and cleaning bleach, the way the floor creaked in one exact spot near the fridge, the sound her mother's slippers made on the linoleum before school. She closed her eyes. In her hand now was a set of new keys because a month ago she had quietly purchased this building not to renovate it, not to flip it, but to preserve it. Because history wasn't something you always outgrew. Sometimes it was something you returned to when you were ready to bring someone else through the door. Inside, the apartment had been kept simple, fresh, paint, stronger floorboards, nothing glossy, nothing erasing what had been. Amara walked room to room. The bedroom she shared with her mother, the little alcove that held the radiator she used to press her socks against on winter mornings, the kitchen window that overlooked a narrow alley, her favorite view in the world as a child, because it meant she could see a sliver of sky. She stood there now, looking up at that same sliver. It was still there. She smiled. Later that afternoon, the neighborhood children began to gather near the stoop. Amara didn't plan it. Word had just spread. The lady who bought the big company is back. One girl, maybe 10 years old, walked up first. "Are you famous?" she asked, squinting suspiciously. Amara laughed. "No, sweetheart, just determined." Another boy jumped in. "Are you rich?" Amara bent down to his level and whispered, "Not as rich as I want all of you to be." The kids laughed. She reached into her satchel and pulled out folders inside. Tablets, enrollment forms, learning software access, and a schedule of free mentorship events being held in the newly converted second-floor unit, what used to be her childhood bedroom. This building was now the first Haven Roots Learning Lab, a program fully funded by Amara's new foundation. It would give students from underserved neighborhoods access to high-level coding classes, robotics kits, interview prep, and financial literacy. Not because it was charity, because it was justice. That evening, Amara sat on the front steps, watching the sun set across the cracked pavement. Her assistant, Sarah, called. "There's a reporter from the Wall Street Journal who wants to do a cover story. They're calling you the next Oprah Gates." Amara smiled. "I don't need a cover, you sure? Tell them I'm on the front page of the Future already." After the call, she pulled out the folded letter, the one she wrote to herself so many years ago. She unfolded it now, smoothing the paper like it was a sacred scroll. "Dear me, if you're reading this, you made it. They said you wouldn't. They looked at your face and your zip code and your silence and saw a statistic. But you saw something else. A doorway. I hope you walked through it. And I hope you held it open behind you. Remember what Mama said. Power is not about being the loudest in the room. It's about knowing when to listen, and who to listen. For I hope you're still listening. I hope you're not afraid to build new rooms entirely, and I hope deep down you never forget what it felt like to wait outside." Amara folded the letter back up. The sky was turning navy now across the street. A mother held her daughter's hand as they walked toward the corner bus stop. The daughter was carrying a robotics kit, smiling. The mother paused. "Ms. Blake," she called out softly. Amara looked up. "I just wanted to say thank you," the woman said, her voice cracking. "No one's ever done something like this here. My daughter thinks you're a superhero." Amara stood, walked across the street, bent down to the little girl. "I'm not a superhero," she said. "I'm just what happens when someone hears you don't belong and doesn't listen." 2 weeks later, the first session of the Haven Roots Lab began, and Amara didn't just fund it, she taught it once a month. She sat with the kids, guiding them through lessons on algorithms, ethics, and imagination. She brought in guests from her leadership team. She let the students ask anything. One day, a boy raised his hand and asked the question she had been waiting for. "Miss Amara, what's power really for?" She paused, then answered, "Power is for creating doors where people only see walls. It's for lifting voices that were taught to whisper. It's for changing systems so the next kid doesn't have to survive them. Power is for sharing, not showing." The boy blinked, then wrote it down, word for word. That night, Amara stood by her apartment window again, looking up at the same sliver of sky. Only this time, it didn't feel like a sliver. It felt wide, endless, possible, because the world had told her once wait outside, and she had. She waited, she watched, and then she walked in anyway. Not just to take a seat, but to build a better table and leave the door wide open behind her.